Have you ever pulled back, gone quiet, not out of anger or pettiness, but from a place of deep clarity, and watched how people react? Have you ever wondered what really goes through their minds when the voice they once took for granted disappears? Without warning, here's the truth. Silence is one of the most misunderstood powers we have. We've been conditioned to think that silence is weak, that love must always be loud, and that pulling back makes us petty or manipulative. But what if I told you that everything you've been taught about silence is wrong? What if the act of going silent, when done with intention, not ego, is actually the most stoic move you could ever make in a relationship? Let's face it, in today's hyper-connected world, disappearing quietly feels radical. And yet, silence done right can shift everything. It changes dynamics. It exposes hidden truths. It reveals who valued your presence and who simply got comfortable with your energy. When you choose silence, you're not just withholding words. You're withdrawing energy, pulling back a mirror, and leaving others to confront the void you once filled. And here's where it gets really powerful. It's not about punishment, it's about protection. It's not about control, it's about clarity. So what happens to them day by day when you go silent? What do they really think? How does your absence echo louder than your presence ever did? In this video, we're walking through each day, one by one, in a way you've never heard before. Each moment reveals something deeper, not just about them, but about you. Because this isn't just about how they respond to your silence. It's about what that silence is unlocking inside you. It's about stepping into your power, understanding your worth, and embracing a level of emotional mastery rooted in stoicism. This journey isn't passive, it's transformational. Get ready. What you're about to discover could change how you approach every interaction, every relationship from this point forward. It's not about playing games, it's about growing beyond the noise. And by the end, you'll see why your silence might be the most honest thing you've ever said. Stay with me, because what comes next will shake their world and elevate yours. And if you've ever found yourself in the storm of emotional imbalance, where words no longer work and your peace is on the line, you won't want to miss what happens at the end. 1. The realization, day 7 and 8. I didn't know what I had. Day 7 doesn't begin with a bang. It begins with an ache, the kind that quietly wakes you in the morning before your eyes open, before your thoughts even fully form. It's the hollow recognition that the silence they once brushed off now feels undeniable, permanent, and deeply unsettling. For days, they told themselves you were just taking space, that the silence was temporary, maybe even strategic. They convinced themselves you'd come back, that you were only trying to make a point, that you couldn't stay away for long. But now their ego's voice has gone faint. The distractions aren't working, and the excuses they've leaned on are starting to collapse under the weight of your absence. Your name hasn't lit up their screen. Your voice hasn't echoed in their notifications. Your energy isn't circling their orbit anymore, and the silence isn't just there, it's everywhere. It's in the stillness between scrolls, the way their favorite songs now carry a sting, the way their mornings feel off, even when nothing's technically wrong. Because something is wrong, and the silence isn't just lack, it's a presence of its own, an emotional force pressing against their mind every hour of the day. You see, they never really noticed the light while it was shining. They only noticed the darkness after it left. That's when the realization hits, not like a sudden panic, but like a sinking, a gradual descent into understanding that what they had wasn't ordinary and that it may not return. They start thinking about the details, the way you remembered things that mattered to them, the way you checked in when no one else did, the steadiness you brought to their chaos, the calm in your voice, the kindness in your consistency. You weren't flashy, you weren't loud, you weren't begging for attention, you were solid, you were foundational. And like all foundations, your value became most obvious the moment it was gone. Now, they replay memories, not just the good ones, but the moments they dismissed you, the times they didn't respond fully, the cold replies, the times they didn't listen. They realize how often you showed up without being asked, how generously you gave without keeping score, how you made them feel seen without needing them to earn it. They're not used to that. They're used to people playing games, showing up when it's easy, disappearing when it's not. But you were different. You didn't just fill the space with noise. You filled it with presence, real presence, the kind that grounds a person, even if they don't realize it at the time. And now, that presence is gone. They no longer wake up expecting your message. They wake up realizing it won't come. They no longer hold their breath for your reply. They've already exhaled into the reality that the version of you who gave freely isn't returning. But don't misunderstand, this part isn't about their pain, it's about your power. Because day 7 is also the day your clarity becomes unshakable. It's the day you no longer flinch at the thought of reaching out. You don't hover over their name. You don't check their story. You don't write messages in your head just to delete them before sending. That urge is gone. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. About yourself. You realize you weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And now, you're done asking. You're not cold. You're calm. You're not angry. You're aligned. You didn't go silent to play mind games. You went silent to heal, to regain the energy you poured into someone who didn't recognize the cost. This is where the Stoic heart begins to emerge, when you stop reacting and start reflecting, when you stop pleading and start protecting. You remember who you are, not the version of you they grew used to, but the man you've been becoming quietly behind the scenes. A man who doesn't scream to be seen, a man who doesn't chase what is slipping away, a man who lets go with grace, not to prove a point, but to preserve his peace, because in Stoic relationships, peace is the point. You don't need to be loud to be clear. You don't need to retaliate to show you're strong. The silence you hold now isn't an empty space. It's a space of power, filled with everything you used to give away for free. Your time, your care, your voice, your emotional labor. You're not withholding anymore. You're choosing carefully where your energy goes. And for the first time, maybe ever, you're choosing yourself. That's the realization they never saw coming. Not that you got tired, but that you're not tired anymore. You're restored. And in your restoration, you've become unreachable. Not because you've vanished, but because you've risen above the dynamic that once drained you. This is where Stoicism breathes through your every action, or more accurately, your lack of action. You've accepted what you cannot control. You've stopped trying to fix what was never willing to meet you halfway. You've stopped arguing with the noise, and instead, you've become the silence. The kind that doesn't beg, the kind that doesn't fold, the kind that echoes. And while they now sit in reflection, wondering how it all slipped away, you sit in something far more powerful, self-respect. The game they thought they were winning is over, not because you lost, but because you stopped playing. And in that decision, you stepped into something sacred, clarity. That's the real transformation. It doesn't happen with a speech. It happens when you wake up and realize you don't need them to see your worth. You just need to live it. That's when they stop wondering if you'll come back and start wondering why they ever thought you would. Because silence in a Stoic relationship isn't an absence, it's a boundary. It's a message written in restraint. And for those who only listened when you shouted, silence becomes the only language they understand. That's what day 7 and 8 are about. Not the pain of separation, but the revelation of strength. Not their grief, but your growth. And by the time they come to terms with what's been lost, you've already made peace with it. You've already turned the page. You've already found your way back to yourself. The version of you who gave endlessly now gives wisely. The man who once needed to be needed now walks with a different posture. Not proud, not bitter, just rooted, calm, intentional, still. And that stillness, It's louder than any word you ever spoke. So while they wrestle with late realizations and lingering questions, you walk forward with certainty, clarity, and the quiet strength that only Stoicism can cultivate. Because in the end, what they think no longer defines you. What you've become does. And that, my friend, is the kind of presence that never fades. It transforms. Let's keep going. What happens next is where it starts to shift even more. 2. The shift from confusion to consequence, day 4 and 5. Day 4 doesn't start like the earlier days. There's no more casual denial, no more distracted scrolling, no more comfort in pretending. Because by now, something has changed, something real, something unmistakable. The silence is no longer a strange silence. It's a familiar one, and that's what makes it hurt. It's not just a pause they expect to end. It's a separation they can't bridge, and the scariest part is that they don't know if they ever will. They're no longer wondering if you'll reach out. They're beginning to suspect you won't, and in that suspicion, fear creeps in. Not loud, not dramatic. It arrives slowly, wrapped in the smallest moments. In the reflexive glance at a notification that never came, in the hesitation before opening your old messages again, in the hollow realization that even their best attempts to get a reaction from you, cryptic posts, curated captions, emotionally loaded song lyrics, haven't moved you. Your silence remains unshaken, calm, still, dignified. And that calm is what terrifies them the most. Because the version of you they knew would have cracked by now. You would have given them just enough to feed their ego. A like, a message, a reaction, something, anything. But you haven't. You've stayed grounded. And that groundedness, that's the consequence they never anticipated. They assumed your presence was permanent. That no matter how they acted, no matter how inconsistent, they were with their care, you'd always find your way back. But now, as your silence deepens, they feel something they didn't prepare for. Loss. Not just the loss of you, but the loss of their emotional leverage over you. And this is when confusion starts to dissolve and consequence begins to settle. The energy has shifted. They know it, they feel it. It's not in what you say, it's in what you don't say. It's not in what you post, it's in what you withhold. Because when you go silent, truly silent, you stop performing. You stop playing the emotional caretaker in someone else's drama. You stop being the safety net for someone who only ever jumped when they knew you'd catch them. And now there's no net, no messages, no reassurance, nothing, just the echo of your absence and the sting of their own behavior reflecting back at them. They scroll through your profile, not to see what you've posted, but to feel the stillness, the space you've left behind. They're not baiting anymore. They're searching, hoping, wondering. And that wondering, that's the unraveling. Because people don't fear silence itself. They fear what it reveals, and your silence is revealing everything. That you no longer respond to crumbs. That you no longer bend just to keep the peace. That you no longer sacrifice clarity for temporary comfort. You've stepped out of the cycle, and in doing so, you've created a void they cannot fill. They don't know how to reach you anymore, not just emotionally, but spiritually. The man you've become is not the man they thought they could predict. He's not chasing, he's not proving, he's not folding, he's standing, firm, still, clear. And in that stillness, you're building something they never expected. A new baseline, one rooted in self-respect, not emotional dependency. One guided by stoicism, not impulse. One that values inner peace over outward performance. And that's what they can't handle, because they relied on your reaction to feel powerful. They were used to pushing a button and watching you respond. But now, the button does nothing, the playbook doesn't work, and they're left with only themselves. That's when the real consequence shows up, not in your silence, but in the truth it reflects. That you were never theirs to control, that your care was not a currency to be manipulated, that your love was not a game piece, it was a gift. One. They handled carelessly, repeatedly, and now that gift is gone, not because you slammed the door, but because you simply stopped showing up. This isn't punishment, this is preservation. This is what Stoic relationships look like when the threshold is crossed and self-respect walks in. You're not trying to hurt them. You're just done hurting yourself. You're not lashing out. You're letting go. And in letting go, you've become the one thing they didn't expect. Free. Free from the loop. Free from the weight. Free from the need to be seen by someone who only saw you when it was convenient. You've stopped being the version of yourself that was always one message away from being pulled back into a place that kept you small. And yes, let's be honest, this part isn't easy. Your ego wants to post something too, something light, something subtle, a reminder that you're still standing, a hint that you're doing well, but that voice, that's not your higher self. That's the old you, the one still craving validation, the one who hasn't fully stepped into the stillness. And this new version of you, he knows better. He knows that silence isn't just withholding words, it's choosing power. It's choosing peace, it's choosing clarity. You don't post, you don't reply, you don't flinch, because real strength doesn't show up in reaction, it shows up in restraint. And they feel that, deeply. That absence of reaction, that refusal to be baited. It's not indifference, it's evolution. It's what happens when a man finally sees his worth and stops auditioning for people who never read the script. And now, they're not just feeling the consequence, they're living in it. They're rereading old messages, looking for signs, wondering when the shift really started, trying to pinpoint the moment they lost their grip. But it wasn't one moment. It was a series of overlooked ones. The sighs, the silence, the times. You bit your tongue, the way your energy dimmed slowly over time. They didn't notice the withdrawal because they were too busy enjoying the warmth, but now it's cold, and they're confused not because you left, but because you left so quietly, without drama, without explanation, just gone. And that kind of departure, that's the kind that lingers, because it wasn't loud, it was real. So if you're standing in this space, holding your silence with strength, resisting the urge to break it just for comfort, then you're already doing the most powerful thing you can. You're protecting your peace. You're not teaching them a lesson. You're learning yours. You're not playing hard to get. You're realizing you were never meant to be chased. You were meant to be cherished. And now, as they come to grips with the consequences of their inaction, you come to peace with your decision. This is the turning point, the moment when silence becomes not a pause, but a principle. Not an absence, but a boundary. Not a tactic, but a transformation. And if you're here, if this resonates, then let's mark this moment together, like this video if you've felt the shift, and drop number 1 in the comments if you're holding the silence not out of spite, but out of strength. Subscribe. If you're choosing self-respect over reactivity, if you're walking the path of growth instead of circling the drain of emotional chaos. Stay with me, because what happens next is where the silence stops being questioned and starts being understood. 3. Doubt and self-reflection, day 3. By the time day 3 arrives, something has shifted that they can no longer deny or delay. The confusion of day 1, the ego-driven games of day 2, they begin to dissolve, replaced by a more uncomfortable guest, doubt. It doesn't crash in. It creeps, slow and quiet, like fog rolling in through the cracks of their self-assured mindset. They no longer ask superficial questions like, is he busy? Or maybe he just forgot to check in. Because now they feel it, not in their thoughts, but in their chest. That subtle pressure, that gnawing sensation they can't ignore even if they try. It whispers in the background of their day, poking at the back of their mind, dragging them. into reflection, whether they're ready or not. That reflection begins innocently enough, scrolling through old messages, voice notes, pictures, the quiet moments you shared that once felt so stable, so inevitable, so permanent. But now, everything looks different through the lens of your absence. They no longer see you as the one who would always return. They see you as someone they might have pushed too far, as someone who might truly be gone. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically, and that scares them. They begin to replay conversations, not just to reminisce, but to search. They dissect your tone, your word choice, trying to find a signal, a warning, a clue that this silence was coming. And deep down, they know it wasn't sudden. You didn't just vanish. You faded, gradually, gracefully, quietly. You stopped explaining. You stopped defending yourself against misunderstandings. You stopped trying to fix energy that was never reciprocated. And now, that lack of effort, that stillness, it screams louder than anything you could have ever said. Because day 3 isn't just about them missing you. It's about them finally facing the possibility that they were the reason you left in the first place. And that realization, it's brutal. Because now the silence feels intentional, and when something feels intentional, it forces accountability. It demands introspection. It creates a space where no one else can be blamed. They start wondering, did I mess this up? Was I too casual with someone who was always all in? Did I overlook the signs because I thought they'd never leave? And these aren't questions that leave quickly. They settle. They sit in the back of the mind and echo throughout the day. Every time their phone lights up and it's not you, that echo gets louder. Every time they instinctively check your profile, hoping for a sign and find none, the doubt deepens. And that's the painful irony. They never realized they were being watched in their inaction. Every ignored message, every half-hearted reply, every moment they chose indifference over intimacy, it all added up. And you saw it all. You felt every disconnect. You internalized the distance. But instead of confronting them, instead of making a scene, you chose stillness. You chose silence. Because you knew that arguing with someone who only listens to their own ego is a battle that drains your soul and fills theirs. You knew that explaining yourself to someone who never truly tried to understand was just another form of emotional labor. And you stopped working for someone who didn't deserve the job of having your presence in their life. This is the heart of Stoic relationships, where silence isn't used as a weapon, but as a boundary. A boundary drawn not to punish, but to protect. To say, I've said enough, I've given enough, now it's your turn to sit with your own echo. And while they may not admit it out loud, their body, their mind, their emotional rhythm knows something's different. They feel your absence not as noise, but as lack, as a missing piece, the one who brought calm into their chaos, structure into their unpredictability, and consistency into their inconsistency. And now that calm is gone, that light is gone, that anchor has been lifted. You were the stability they didn't know they needed until it vanished. But let's be honest, day 3 isn't just hard for them, it's hard for you too. You remember the good moments, the laughter, the late-night messages, the way it felt when they actually did see you, hear you, value you. You miss that version of them, the version that made you believe the effort was worth it. And part of you wonders if they feel it too. If they finally understand what they had, if they realize that your silence isn't emptiness, it's consequence. But you don't reach out. Not because you don't care, but because you care more about yourself now. And in that care, you've embraced a radical truth. People don't change because you tell them how they hurt you. They change when they have to sit in the aftermath of their choices without you cleaning up the mess. And that's exactly what you've stopped doing, cleaning up. You no longer make excuses for them. You no longer justify their absence. You no longer fill in the gaps they left because you've realized that every time you patch the holes, you are also patching over your own pain. That's not healing, that's hiding. And on day 3, you're done hiding. You're standing in your silence, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You've stopped circling conversations that lead nowhere. You've stepped out of the emotional loop and into your own light. And yes, it's lonely at first, it's quiet, but that quiet is sacred. It's not a void, it's a container for your healing, your reflection, your growth. And while they sit in uncertainty, you sit in intention. This is what Stoicism teaches us, not to detach from emotion, but to master it, to stop letting others control our peace, to stop letting external noise drown out internal wisdom. You've stopped bleeding emotionally for someone who didn't know how to stop you from hurting, and now you've bandaged those wounds, not with revenge, but with release. You're not chasing closure. You are the closure. You are the final word. You are the silence that teaches louder than speeches ever could. They don't need your explanation. They need to sit with the silence they created. Because sometimes the most honest thing you can do is walk away without saying a word. Not because you didn't have something to say, but because you finally realized they wouldn't have listened when it mattered. So you chose stillness. And in that stillness, you reclaimed something they could never understand, your self-respect. Because self-respect doesn't raise its voice, it walks away. It doesn't seek validation, it creates value. And now, as they scroll and scroll, searching for signs that the door is still open, they begin to feel what they never feared before. That the door isn't just closed, it's locked. And the key that was lost the moment they stopped appreciating the access you gave so freely. They don't know how to handle this version of you. The one who doesn't explain, the one who doesn't ask twice, the one who values peace over permission. The one who has stepped out of the role they got comfortable watching you play. You're not the caretaker anymore. You're the creator of your own emotional landscape. You're not waiting for them to show up differently. You're showing yourself what it means to walk in alignment. And that's what hurts them most. Not that you're angry, but that you're calm. Not that you're hurt, but that you're healing. Not that you're punishing them, but that you've outgrown the need to prove anything. And when they realize that, truly realize that, it shakes them. Because you didn't ask for too much. You just stopped accepting too little. And that shift, that awareness, that final moment when doubt becomes reflection and reflection becomes regret, that's when they know something's different this time. You're not just silent, you're gone. Not in body, in energy, in access, in availability. And that's the cost they never calculated. You were never too much. They were just not enough for a man who had already begun rising. And now that you've risen, you won't shrink to fit into a space that never valued your full expression. So you stay quiet, still, rooted, and they sit in their storm, finally forced to feel what you felt for far too long. That's the power of silence. Not to control others, but to command your own life. That's the core of Stoic relationships, the courage to walk alone when the crowd no longer aligns with your peace. You've chosen that path, and every step in silence is another. Step back to yourself, let them wonder, let them spiral, let them sit with the weight of what they've lost. Because this silence isn't a pause, it's your liberation, and you don't need to say a word to prove that. You're already living it. Let's move forward. What comes next reveals even more than they were prepared to see. 4. The Ego's Defense, Day 2. Day 2 begins differently, not with clarity, not with sorrow, but with resistance. This is the ego's day, its performance, its defense mechanism. Because when someone like you, someone consistent, present, and emotionally generous goes silent, the mind doesn't immediately turn to introspection. No, it fights, it protects its narrative. It deflects responsibility, and so on day 2, they don't admit anything is wrong, not to themselves, not to others. Instead, they go into performance mode. They open your chat, see that you haven't messaged, and then immediately close it again, pretending not to care. They click on your profile, but they don't interact. They just watch. They stay still, hoping you'll make the first move, because that's what they're used to. You've always been the one to break the silence first. You've always been the one to restore the emotional balance, even when they were the ones who disrupted it. So they wait, but not patiently. They wait while planting digital landmines, strategic posts, curated photos, cryptic captions. It's not vulnerability, it's bait. It's their way of poking at your silence without admitting they feel it. Maybe it's a sad lyric. Maybe it's a meme with a double meaning. Maybe it's a quote about missing someone, but framed in a way that screams, "I'm fine." But it's all performance. Because deep down, something already feels off. They can't explain it logically, so they try to counter it emotionally. This is when the ego pulls out its full bag of tricks: distraction, denial, projection. It tells them you're just busy. It tells them you're playing games. It tells them you're trying to manipulate the energy. But every time they go quiet and wait for your usual reaction, and it doesn't come, a new feeling creeps in: uncertainty. And the ego hates uncertainty, because uncertainty means they're no longer in control, so they keep testing the waters. They check who's viewed their story. They check timestamps. They monitor your digital presence, not because they're curious, but because they're afraid. Afraid that maybe this silence isn't temporary. Maybe it means something more, but they can't admit that yet. So they fall deeper into defense. They remind themselves of their value. They replay past moments where you chased. They tell themselves you'll do it again, that you're just having a moment, that any second now you'll come back. You always do. But then another hour passes, and another, and still nothing. And that's when the ego begins to buckle. Just slightly, just enough to let in the smallest whisper of doubt. Wait, what if this time is different? And that thought lingers. It doesn't shout, it hovers. And the longer your silence stretches, the more that whisper turns into a hum, then a buzz, then a hum that won't stop. It's in the background of everything they do. Watching TV? It's there. Scrolling their phone? It's there. Sitting in silence. It's loud, because what they don't realize is that your silence isn't a pause, it's a message. One they didn't expect, one they didn't prepare for, one they can't decode because they've never experienced it before. You were the one who always spoke up, the one who always reached out, the one who couldn't sit in tension. But now, you're still, you're unbothered. And that unbothered energy is terrifying to someone who relied on your validation to feel secure. This is when they begin to post not just to be seen, but to be seen by you. Every move is calculated, every image chosen with care, every caption written for an audience of one, you. But here's the thing. They don't realize you're no longer in that audience. You've left the theater. You've stopped watching the play, and without your applause, the entire performance starts to feel empty. That's when frustration begins to surface. Not the kind they show publicly, but the kind they feel internally. Because no matter what they do, it doesn't work. You don't react, you don't move, you don't even flinch. And that confuses them. It shakes the foundation of the dynamic they got comfortable with, because your lack of reaction doesn't make sense to their ego. Their ego expects you to be predictable. It expects you to return to the script, but you've rewritten the script. You've stepped out of the character they cast you in, and now you're not playing a role, you're living your truth. That's the power of Stoicism. It teaches you to stop acting for the approval of others and start living in accordance with your inner peace. You're not punishing them, you're protecting yourself, you're not waiting on them, you're walking forward. And they feel that shift in their soul, even if they won't say it out loud. because something inside them knows if you were going to return, you would have by now. If you were going to break the silence, you would have done it already. But you haven't. You've held the line. And in doing so, you've revealed a version of yourself they never took seriously. The version that doesn't chase. The version that doesn't explain. The version that doesn't fold. That version is real. That version is here. And it's not going anywhere. So they scroll, they post, they perform. But the audience is gone. And without the audience, the performance falls apart. That's when they begin to feel the emotional cost of their previous actions, not as guilt, but as absence, as emptiness, as silence. And that silence, it's starting to make more sense than any words ever could. Because when someone who always showed up stops showing up, it creates a void that no caption can fill, no story can distract from, no performance can mask. This is the unraveling, the peeling back of the ego, the beginning of awareness. It's not full recognition yet, that comes later. But it's the first fracture in the wall they built around their feelings. And every moment you stay silent, that crack grows. Because the truth is, you were never trying to hurt them. You were just done hurting yourself. You weren't pulling away to manipulate. You were pulling away to survive. You weren't choosing silence for attention. You were choosing silence for clarity. And now, as they wrestle with that clarity, you find yourself standing in something sacred, your self-worth. You've stopped playing the game. You've stepped into something bigger than validation. You've stepped into sovereignty. You've become emotionally self-sufficient. You've realized that your peace isn't up for negotiation. Not anymore. That's what makes this silence so powerful. It's not about them. It's about you, your growth, your standards, your energy. You're no longer giving away access to someone who didn't know how to hold it. And they're finally starting to feel the consequences of that decision. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't. Because you let the silence speak. That's the lesson of Stoic relationships. That sometimes the strongest statement you can make is no statement at all. So if this moment resonates with you, if you've ever stood in that quiet power and watched the ego of someone else begin to unravel as yours realigned, then you know exactly what this feels like. Like a calm storm, like a soft thunder, like a silence that wraps around your healing like armor. And if you're holding that silence today, not as punishment, but as a promise to yourself, then let's honor that together. Like this video, if you feel the strength of that silence, and drop number 1 in the comments if this message speaks to the version of you that refuses to flinch. Subscribe if you're choosing inner truth over outer noise, stillness over performance, stoicism over reaction. Stay close, because tomorrow the silence begins to strip away the ego completely, and the truth that follows changes everything. 5. The Disturbance of Peace, Day 1. Day 1 doesn't begin with panic. It begins with something far more deceptive, discomfort, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the air. The absence of your voice isn't fully registered at first, not consciously. It doesn't come crashing into their world with obvious warning signs or dramatic tension. It shows up in the space between things. In the moment, they check their phone and realize it's quieter than usual. In the sudden lack of a message they always expected. In the silence where a good morning text, a check-in, or even a meme used to live. The realization is not immediate, but the feeling is something's off. The rhythm has broken, and while they might not be ready to say it aloud, a part of them senses what has begun: your silence. At first, they search for convenient answers. Maybe you're busy. Maybe your phone died. Maybe you needed space. None of these thoughts are alarming on their own, but together they plant a seed of unease. You were a presence, a consistency, a pattern in their day. You were the voice in the background of their chaos. And now that voice is gone. It's not that you were saying anything groundbreaking. It's that you were saying something, anything. And now you're not. That's what rattles them. The sudden lack of input, the way your energy, which once filled a space so effortlessly, is now nowhere to be found. And it's not just what you said or did, it was what your presence represented: comfort, predictability, stability. Even if they never admitted it, even if they treated it casually, they relied on it, on you. And now that you're gone, not with anger, not with explanation, but with calm, intentional silence, it throws their world out of balance. You were the rhythm, and now the beat is gone. And the human mind, the ego especially, hates broken rhythms. It seeks familiarity, it craves patterns, it tries to restore equilibrium in any way it can. So it starts to ask questions, not from the soul, but from survival. Did something happen? Are they upset? Are they doing this on purpose? But instead of confronting those questions with honesty, they push them away and distract themselves. They scroll endlessly. They talk to other people. They tell themselves stories. He'll text tomorrow. She's probably just tired. Maybe they're waiting for me to say something first. But no matter what distractions they chase, when the noise fades, when the room goes quiet again, they feel it. That stillness, that absence, that void, it doesn't scream. It hums, constant and low, in the back of their mind. Because what's really happening is this: they've just felt the first tremor of the emotional earthquake that silence causes, when it's held by someone who used to speak. And this isn't about ego, it's about impact. Because when you choose silence, not to manipulate but to maintain your peace, it forces people to confront their own noise. It removes the buffer. It takes away the mirror they used to avoid looking into. You were that mirror, not because you judged, but because you were consistent. You reflected back to them who they were, even when they weren't ready to see it. And now that you're gone, they have to look at themselves without your light softening the view. This is the beginning of the internal tension they won't talk about, the part where they feel a tug in their chest but pretend it's not there, where they glance at your last message, hoping to find something they missed, some hint that you'll return. But there's nothing. Just the final word, the last message, the quiet exit. And they won't say it, but it lingers. Why does this feel different? Why does their silence feel so loud? And here's the truth they won't admit, because deep down they knew this was coming, not in detail, not in timing, but in energy. They felt the shift before the silence. They sensed your withdrawal, the subtle changes, the pauses, the emotional fatigue that they chose to ignore. They saw the signs but didn't think they mattered. They assumed you'd stay. You always had. They mistook your consistency for obligation, your kindness for availability, your patience for permanence. And now that you've gone quiet, they're left reeling, not because you exploded, but because you didn't, not because you raged, but because you simply stepped away, without ceremony, without drama, just stillness. And that stillness is what breaks them more than any loud goodbye ever could. Because silence doesn't demand attention. It commands it. It makes people lean in. It makes them listen. And what they're hearing now is their own inner voice. One that's starting to sound nervous. One that's whispering things like, "Did I take them for granted? Did I miss my chance? Are they really not coming back?" But they don't want to face those thoughts, not yet. So they bury them. They keep pretending. They keep performing. They tell themselves that silence is weakness, that caring means staying loud, that if you really loved them, you'd have said something. But in Stoic relationships, silence isn't weakness. It's restraint. It's wisdom. It's the decision to stop pouring into a cracked glass. It's the recognition that sometimes peace requires distance, that not all connections deserve maintenance, and on day one, this truth is just beginning to dawn on them. Slowly, uncomfortably, in the quiet moments between conversations, in the seconds before sleep, in the reflection of your absence, because you didn't just stop texting, you stopped showing up energetically, you stopped giving what was no longer being honored. You withdrew not to punish, but to preserve yourself, your sanity, your clarity. And that's what they can't reconcile yet. They still think this is temporary, a test, a move in some game. But it's not. It's a new chapter. One where you no longer explain your boundaries, you just live them. And in doing so, you're writing a truth they weren't prepared to read, that your presence was never a right, it was a privilege. And day one is the beginning of them learning just how much it meant now that it's gone. Let them sit in that silence. Let them feel the shift, because this is only the beginning of what your absence will teach. Not through anger, not through argument, but through quiet, unwavering, unshakable peace. That's how it begins, and what follows is the echo. 6. Your inner transformation throughout the week. Across the 7 days, as the silence you chose begins to echo in the lives of others, something deeper and far more powerful is happening within you. A transformation not marked by noise or chaos, but by calm, by clarity, by a new posture rooted in stillness. This is the part they don't see. While they sit in discomfort, confusion, doubt, and regret, you are not just absent from their world, you are becoming present in your own. You are undergoing a process that cannot be rushed, explained, or witnessed from the outside. It is internal. It is sacred. It is the reclamation of your power. Because you didn't go silent just to make a statement. You went silent to make space. Space for reflection. Space for realignment. Space to meet the version of yourself that no longer needs to be understood to feel whole. And in that space, you begin to realize things you couldn't see before. You see how many times you overextended, how often you explained your heart to people who weren't even listening, how you spent so much time trying to keep relationships alive that you forgot to keep yourself alive. You see how often you chose peace for others while creating storms inside yourself. You see that what you called patience was sometimes avoidance, and what you called love was often a quiet plea to be seen fully. But now you're seeing clearly. Because silence is a mirror, and in that mirror, you meet yourself again. Not the version of you that was constantly shrinking, adjusting, softening your truth just to be accepted. But the version that stands tall, not with pride, but with presence. You've stopped waiting for others to validate your worth. You've stopped negotiating your value in spaces that couldn't hold your depth. This is the birth of Stoicism within you, not as an idea, but as a lived principle. You are no longer moved by fleeting emotion. You are anchored in meaning, in purpose, in truth. And this truth, it's not loud. It doesn't need to be. It lives in how you move, how you no longer chase, how you no longer feel the need to defend yourself to those who misunderstand you. Because now you understand you. You know the difference between peace and silence, between space and disconnection, between love and obligation, and that knowledge rewires how you show up, not just in relationships, but in every room you enter. You're no longer the person checking your phone every few minutes, hoping for a sign that someone misses you. You are no longer the person posting cryptic messages to be noticed. You are no longer waiting for an apology, for closure, for understanding, because your closure is your silence. Your apology is your growth. Your understanding is in the way you now hold yourself, with grace, with power, with intentional stillness. And it's not just what you've stopped doing, it's what you've started to cultivate. You've begun nurturing the parts of you that got buried beneath emotional noise. Your creativity, your peace, your standards, your intuition. You are rebuilding your center, one silent breath at a time. And the world around you, it feels it. People may not say it, but they sense it. The way your energy no longer reaches for attention. The way your silence now holds more weight than your words ever did. the way your absence has become presence in its own right. That's the paradox of true transformation. When you stop proving, you start becoming. When you stop explaining, you start embodying. And now you are embodying everything you used to beg others to recognize in you: strength, value, integrity, self-respect. Not to impress anyone, but because that's who you've always been, beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the emotional labor. This is the quiet awakening of a man who no longer attaches his peace to external validation. This is what it means to step into stoic relationships where connection is built on mutual respect, not performance. Where communication is clean, not clouded with desperation. Where boundaries are not threats, they're acts of self-love. And as the days pass, you feel lighter. Not because the process is easy, but because you're no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. You're no longer explaining your silence. You're honoring it. You're no longer waiting for them to get it. You've already gotten it. You've gotten the lesson. You've gotten the clarity. You've gotten your power back. And with that power comes responsibility, not to return to what broke you, not to retaliate, but to rise, to walk forward, to speak only when it serves peace, not ego. Because you don't owe anyone an explanation for your healing. You owe yourself the commitment to protect it. Let them think what they want. Let them wonder. Let them reflect. That's their journey. Yours is here, rooted in presence, grounded in truth, alive with purpose. You've stopped being accessible to people who only valued what you gave them, not who you are. And in doing so, you've reclaimed the most valuable thing you have, your energy. You are not missing. You are not hiding. You are evolving. You are not bitter. You are not cold. You are awake. And that awareness changes everything. It shifts your standards. It elevates your environment. It filters your connections, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. You are not looking back, not because you've forgotten, but because you've learned. You are not explaining your silence, not because it doesn't have meaning, but because it no longer needs words to be felt. And those who feel it, truly feel it, will understand. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, because silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of wisdom. So if this resonates with you, if you've felt yourself becoming this version of you in the quiet, then you're not alone. Like this video if your silence has brought you strength. Comment #1 below if you've stepped into your power and refused to look back. And subscribe if you're building a life rooted in clarity, in stillness, in the unshakable foundation that only stoicism and true self-worth can create. Keep walking forward. The silence isn't the end. It's the beginning of everything real. Your silence was never meant to be loud. It was meant to be clear. This journey, 8 days of stillness, of distance, of not responding, not explaining, was never about revenge, never about proving a point, and never about pulling strings. It was about remembering who you are when no one else is watching. It was about recentering your soul when the noise of expectation and emotional chaos had pulled you too far from your own truth. You didn't vanish to be missed. You stepped back to be seen clearly, first by yourself. And in that stillness, you found the answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. What am I really giving to those who have not earned access? To my peace. You walked through discomfort without reaching for validation. You endured the temptation to explain yourself, to soften the boundary, to reopen a door that was already draining you. That is strength. That is restraint. That is stoicism in motion, not as a philosophy to quote, but as a daily decision to honor your energy like it's sacred. Because it is. The echo of your absence didn't just shake their comfort zone, it reminded them that you are not a default. You are a decision. You are not someone to be expected. You are someone to be appreciated. And when that appreciation runs out, so does your presence. Not with drama, not with a storm, but with quiet, unshakable stillness. And now here you are, Not broken, not bitter, clear, unavailable in all the right ways, free in all the places you used to be held hostage by approval, focused on your path, your growth, your inner mastery. You've learned that peace isn't something you find in other people. It's something you return to when you stop giving it away to everyone who didn't value it. Let them remember your silence, not as emptiness, but as the fullest expression of your self-respect. Because you didn't go silent to be chased. You went silent because you finally stopped chasing. And now you walk, not away, but forward. Always forward, with clarity, with purpose, with the presence of a man who has nothing left to prove and everything ahead to build. Stay the path. The silence has spoken. And what it left behind was not just absence, it was legacy.